Hi, Nikki Grimes. I'm Hannah Miner.
Hello, how are
It's
you?
nice to meet you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, so I'd like to start off with, is this a career that you've always wanted, writing?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I knew from the time I started writing at 6 that this is what I wanted to do. It took me a while to convince everybody else, but I knew what I wanted.
And what made you want to write?
Many things. For one, my fascination with language. I loved that one word could mean many different things. I loved the idea that you could write something down that was funny and 1,000 miles away somebody could read it and laugh. The power and magic of that. And I loved stories. I was also interested though in becoming a writer because of how important books were to me as a reader, and how much joy and comfort and inspiration I got from them, and wanting to be able to share that with readers of my own work someday.
And what was your favorite book when you were a child?
Oh, that I couldn't tell you, because I didn't really own books. And I would spend hours in the library, but I was always reading something new and just exploring, and I read broadly. I would read folk tales and mysteries and plays and Nordic tales and Vikings. And my reading was very broad.
Out of all the books that you've written, which one is your favorite that you've written?
Well, my books are like my children, and if I chose one, all the others would be jealous. So I always choose whatever is the newest book. That gets to be my favorite until the next book comes along. So right now my favorite book is Words with Wings, and it gets to be my favorite until Chasing Freedom comes out in January, and then that will be my favorite book.
Does your childhood have a large impact on your books that you've written?
Oh, for sure. I am very much in touch with my childhood. When I write, my intent is to climb into the skin of a child and to look at the world through his or her eyes. So I go there.
When you were writing a new book, what are some things that you do to help you get ideas or to think of things?
Mostly asking questions. Because when you answer one question, that always leads to other questions. So, curiosity is the most important ingredient, I think, to any kind of writing.
And why did you choose to write for children?
Well, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I had planned this career in adult literature. I was planning on writing the great American novel, and someone told me a few years ago, you already did, you just wrote it for teens. But I had my own plans, but I did think I wanted to write a couple of books for children because I did have something, some stories I wanted to share. Mm-hmm. And then my plan was that I was then going to go back to writing for adults. That was 35 years ago. I never quite got back to it.
Do you think you're going to soon or later?
Well, I have a couple of stories that I would like to write and like to tell at some point. But the books for children and young adults, middle grade and high school readers keep getting in the way. So we'll see if that actually ever happens.
Are any of your characters in your books based off of people that you've actually met?
Some are inspired by some characters. A lot of characters are composites. You take, characteristics of one person here and something from someone else there and blend them, and you'll add something new, and so it's really a composite. I find it funny though when I have based a character on someone I know, they don't even recognize themselves in the book. I'll, talk about the book, and, I know they've read it, and they still have no clue that, that particular character was actually based on them.
And do you tell them?
I don't. I like having the secret.
Do you often get feedback from your readers? Like, do they tell you about?
Oh, all the time.
And do you like it?
I do. I do, yeah.
Have you ever gotten negative feedback?
Once or twice. I mean, what I love about young people is their honesty. And I get that, I get it in their letters, but I also get it when I visit schools, especially when I visit schools. And I think it's hilarious. I talk a lot about the importance of rewriting and how much rewriting it requires to create a polished, finished work that's ready for publication. And I remember in one audience, a boy, said, "Well, you must not be very good then, because I only have to write my stories once." That's something that only a child would say. I love that kind of it's refreshing, that kind of honesty.
Would you ever consider writing an autobiography?
I have, and I don't so much consider that as doing memoir. I love memoir writing, and I started one many years ago, as my agent will keep telling me, "Oh, when are you going to get back to that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I need to get back to that." So it will happen.
That's good. Those are always good to read. Do you participate in social media to advertise your books?
I do. It's part of the business anymore. Otherwise, I wouldn't, because I'm a Luddite by nature. But I've learned some of the ins and outs of social media because you need to do that to promote your work. So yeah. So I Facebook and do a little Twitter. I still haven't quite got the Twitter thing down, but I'm in there.
What is the difference between poetry and prose, in your opinion?
What I love about poetry is that it is so close to the bone. If you're going after a certain intensity of emotional impact, there isn't anything better than poetry for that. I find it's harder to bridge that kind of emotional distance between reader and character in prose, at least it is for me, than in poetry. I don't know, and I don't always decide beforehand which it's going to be. Sometimes it's a feel thing. When I first wrote the story for Meet Denitra Brown, I intended it to be a traditional story. And it wasn't working, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I knew what stories I wanted to tell. The idea was clear, and yet it wasn't. I felt like I was pushing a boulder up a hill. And so I stepped back from it, and I said, okay, let me read the manuscript and highlight all the passages that are working. And I did that, and I discovered that it wanted to be poetry. All the passages that were working were poetic. It was just poetry that went across the page, but it was poetry. And once I realized that, I thought, okay, this story will be told in poems. That's what it wants. And as soon as I switched over, the block was gone. Then it just flowed. So sometimes I come in to a project thinking it's going to be one thing and finding out, well, no, it wants to be something else.
Talk a little bit about Chasing Freedom.
Chasing Freedom is the newest book. It comes out in January. And it's a book about it's a conversation I've created between Harriet Tubman and Susan B. Anthony. And the germ for the idea came back in 1988 when I was working on a series of monologues for a theater production that was going to be taking place in China, and I was asked to write, to work on the script. And so I did some research and chose for my subjects for this American history show they were doing. I chose Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Susan B. Anthony, and I did some research in order to create monologues in the voice of each one. And in the process of doing that research, came to discover that not only did they all live at the same time, but that they all knew one another. And I thought, oh, I wonder what it would be like if Harriet Tubman and Susan B. Anthony sat down for a conversation, what would that be like? And then I forgot about the idea for years and years. And then one of my publishers asked me 2 years ago, why don't you do a book on Harriet Tubman? And my initial response was, oh, please. Harriet Tubman has been done to death. I'm not going to do a new book on Harriet Tubman. And then I forgot about it. And then about 2 weeks later, I remembered this old idea. And I thought, well, I called him and I said, there is this one idea I have that would be different, and told him about it. And he said, yeah, do that. And so then I started researching in earnest in order to be able to write that book. And I love historical fiction. I got excited about history when I discovered historical fiction, because then it's not just names and dates that you're memorizing, but you're learning about the people in context and who were their influences, who did they spend time with, where did they connect with what was going on in their time. And I find it fascinating, and I certainly found it fascinating during the research for this book, because we're looking at the Underground Railroad, the Civil War, the early suffragette movement, all of these things, and all of the personalities that were present and influential throughout that period.
Is this aimed for all ages?
Yeah. It's an illustrated book, but it really is for all ages.
All right. Thank you very much. It was very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.